Welcome to PTI's Professional Development Series, Episode 1, Talking to Strangers and How to Build and Maintain Relationships with Organizational Partners Outside of IT.
Welcome to the Public Technology Institute webinar series. And my name is Darryl Polk. I'm the Director of Education for Public Technology Institute. And today we're doing a presentation on talking with strangers, and it's the value of building a professional network. So although this isn't a technical talk, we're going to talk about the technical aspects of building a personal brand and building a personal network, the value of building a personal network, and what outcomes you should be shooting for when you're in the process of building your personal network. So I think a good place to start is overcoming fear. That's the driver that kind of keeps us from building these relationships and broadening our scope over time. So most of us in the IT field, we got into this because we're introverts by nature. We're the ones who were building Legos when we were kids and coding on our, Tandy TR-80 or our Commodore 64. And we didn't particularly get a lot of energy from interacting with other people. And I know that's a broad generalization, and I probably only speak for my generation because over time, that has certainly changed as technology has become more part of the social mainstream. But at my age, when I started at all this in the late 70s and early 80s, technology was kind of a loner's sport. So when I talk about overcoming fear for us, for technology professionals, it's overcoming that concern that we all have about judgment. So let's talk about fear a little bit. So when fear is in many ways the core emotion for human beings. It is the emotion that resides in the limbic part of the brain. So if you think of the brain as a 3D space, the limbic brain is the small kind of lizard brain that's at the center of everything, and it's our fight or flight context. It's the part of us that for hundreds of thousands of years kept us alive. It let us identify threats and figure out whether we were going to fight or flee or try and eat it or whatever we were going to do. But it all started with kind of a fear reaction. And if you think about it now, fast forward to modern human beings, it's still really the only involuntary emotion that we carry. Now, we like to think that joy and love and other things are involuntary emotions, but really those are conditional. You have to be in the right frame of mind, and you can put yourself in a frame of mind that avoids feeling those emotions. Fear is almost 100% involuntary. True fear is when you actually lose control of your other emotions, and now you're in a reactive mode, once again, taking you back to that fight or flight. So most of the other emotional range that we have exists more in this prefrontal cortex. So think of the front of the brain, the most recently developed part of the brain. And I know this is, not my wheelhouse. I am not a biologist and I am not a doctor, but this is research that I found through Harvard Business Review and through other scholarly articles that I've followed over time, talking about kind of the nature of our psychology. And the reason I want to start with fear is I do think that is the driver that keeps us from developing these networks. We're afraid of judgment. We're afraid of people rejecting us. Nobody wants to feel that. Nobody wants to feel that they got left out of something. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. Nobody wants to come across as less competent or less professional than they feel that they are, because those moments define how we see ourselves. So part of setting up a network, part of establishing these relationships is overcoming that fear in the first place and understanding that caution is not the abandonment of action in the face of fear. It's the choice to move forward anticipating a positive outcome. So using some form of caution simply means that you are preparing to try and mitigate risk while you venture into this, and at the same time choosing to pursue something novel, something that you haven't done before, meeting somebody that you've never met before. And so what we're going to do in the webinar today is really talk about some really basic mechanics that go into that, things that I've used and that I've benefited from, things that I've researched that I believe I could benefit from, that other people could benefit from. But really, it's giving people who are introverts at heart. And an introvert is not a loner. An introvert is somebody who social interaction costs them energy. There are extroverts out there that social interaction builds their energy. They get amped up. They feel more charged. For a lot of people, myself included, social interactions, especially with people they don't know, especially in kind of these networking environments where it's small talk, it's introductions, it's not deep philosophical conversation, they can be draining. And you walk away feeling like you've just run a marathon sometimes. But it's so worthwhile to do it because the deep relationships where you can have those conversations, where you can build that trust, come from these interactions. Everybody in our lives was a stranger at one point in time. So it's getting past stranger and getting to the point where they are part of our network and somebody that we trust and somebody that we want to interact with. So why is this important from a career perspective? Why are we doing this at the Public Technology Institute? Well, it's because networking is important. Research shows that people with stronger networks end up with higher salaries and more promotions. That's from an HBR article from 2023. I think it holds as true now as it did then. And I think, honestly, this has been the truth for a long, long time. There's a point at which all of the proficiency in the world, all of the technical knowledge in the world, even all of the leadership skills in the world won't get you to the next phase of your career. And we'll talk about the value of that. We'll talk about whether that's important. We'll talk about decision making on your career. But it's really a matter of if you want to get to the executive level, if you want to be able to take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way in the executive space, you need to develop a really robust network, a professional and social network. And the two are different, but they do overlap. So we'll talk about different networks and kind of different values from having these different networks. But at the end of the day, there's a very pragmatic takeaway from this. And that is if you want to be afforded all the opportunity that you deserve, that you aspire to, you need to put yourself in places and with people that can leverage your experience to get that opportunity, to fulfill that, and to become a success. So I want to talk about the 3 stages of career growth. We all go through a journey, but if you look at these journeys, there's a commonality. And for most of us, unless we're, born into royalty or born into a situation where we are assumed to be an executive, if you're inheriting a company or something like that, or have a certain last name, then okay, I guess you bypass this. But for the rest of us, the vast, vast majority of us, our career goes through 3 stages. And the first stage, so I'm using this analogy for those of you that are either my age or geeks or both, you're looking at a Saturn V rocket. This is the transportation system that took us to the moon. And the reason I like this analogy is number one, I was an Apollo geek when I was a kid. So the slides you see next to that, or the patches you see on the slide, are my personal collection from when I was a child. So growing up, I aspired to be an astronaut. And we're going to talk about kind of the tie-in of that conversation now. It's not just a random anecdote. But one of the things that they had to do is figure out how to escape Earth's gravity so they could get into space and ultimately get to the moon. And when you look at a Saturn V rocket, you have 3 stages that comprise 80% of that vehicle. And those are simply to escape Earth's gravity. So if we break each stage down, think about your career as escaping gravity. So you start off as a line level employee, you have task level responsibilities. How do you get out of that? So your first stage is building competency. And in the technology field, we all know what that looks like. It's building a broad competency maybe where you understand several different platforms, several different verticals to some degree. But for most of it, it's building a specialty in something that we're responsible for. So maybe you were help desk and you did endpoint support or you did account support for AD. Maybe you were a network person. Maybe you were a business systems analyst or even a developer. There are all these different verticals that we build our competency in. And building that competency is important mostly because it gives us a sense of self-competency, that we now feel secure, that we can talk to other people and be confident about our knowledge, be confident about our abilities, be confident about what we offer the organization. So you spend this inordinate part of your career for most of us. For me, it was really the first probably 20 years of my career was building competency, going and having to start over, starting in more of operational roles, moving into technology roles, having to learn new systems. But it was slowly and steadily building this sense of I knew what my competencies were. But then when you get to stage two, it's showing other people those competencies. It's building trust. It's becoming the go-to person. So there's a stage that many people get to in technology where you become the go-to for your vertical. Maybe you're the person that manages your Active Directory. Maybe you're the person that runs your ERP system. Maybe you're the person who manages all of your GIS. There are all these different verticals, but eventually, if you put enough time in and put enough effort in, you become a go-to person. And that role is so important because it builds your ego and it doesn't build it on kind of a false pretense of expertise. You're building your ego, you're building your sense of self-worth on actual competency, on the ability to produce, the ability to do things well. That then leverages into trust, which is an external acknowledgement of your competencies. It's where people around you know you're the go-to person. Oh, this is our, GIS wizard over here. And if I need something done, I'm calling them. If there's a crisis, if there's a project, and you start to kind of get these pulls where other people know who you are and they know what you're good at. They know what they can go to you for. So you spend part of your career kind of in this. And in the IT field, many people level out here. So it's very, very common, especially for people that are inherently introverted, to simply because it's such a comfortable place. But you're never going to escape orbit. You're never going to escape Earth's gravity at that level. You have to be, and there's no shame in that. If you're comfortable being at that level, that's great. But there's still value in building networks because it still expands your opportunities to stay at that level, to be an expert within that realm. But if you want to get into leadership, you must move into stage three, which is building relationships. And you can think about relationships existing at several planes, but see how it gets to be a smaller stage of the rocket. So you need to have this large investment in competency, a somewhat smaller investment in building trust with people. And then you can leverage all of that because you've already taken care of the heavy lift. With a Saturn V rocket, the hardest work is moving the first 6 inches. You are at a dead stop. You are completely held to gravity, and you have to get 6 inches off of that launch pad. That is where most of the fuel is expended in a Saturn V launch and in any rocket launch, is that initial move. Once you get into higher orbit, gravity has less pull. And for a professional, it means that you've put so much effort in that now it's easier to take advantage and start building relationships. And that stage three is what we're going to be focused on today, is where you're moving from building trust into actually building genuine relationships that you can then leverage for the payload, which is your career. And if you look at this, just that very, very top part of the rocket is what this is all about. That's your career. It's that payload there was the lunar lander module and the lunar command module, that the command module went around the moon and kind of kept things moving while guys landed on the moon and did their thing and planted a flag and put their footsteps there. So you think of that in terms of your career. Your moonshot is where you strive to be. And understand that, and this is where I'm bringing back the patch analogy. I never made it to astronaut. Surprise, that's not part of my career field. I was not an astronaut. I never came close to being an astronaut. I ended up on this completely other path that I would never have imagined when I was 7 years old watching the Apollo missions. Okay. But what I did is, as I moved into different things, I kept that ambition of there's something more that I could be doing. The ambition to become an astronaut when I was a kid kept me academically engaged, kept me reading, kept me exploring science, and it served as a motivator, served as my stage one building competency for many years. But when I became older and left high school and realized that there's not a big market for astronauts, especially after they just, stopped the Apollo program, and that's a whole other discussion about the space shuttle and all of that, kind of our downtime for space exploration. But what I'm getting at is that building the core competencies gave me the ability to pivot to another opportunity when it arose. And that is cognitive flexibility. So I'm going to go through a set of skills you can develop, of behaviors you can adopt that help with building a network. Because it's not, as I said before, it's not an inherent thing. There are people that are fairly good at it, people that don't have to put a lot of effort into it. But I would venture to guess that most of those people focused on building these skills intuitively, that they probably just unconsciously through their, life experience figured out these traits and these qualities that seem to help them in building their networks, and building their networks helped them in moving forward. So cognitive flexibility is kind of a foundational one. And the idea of cognitive flexibility is the idea that you can actually adjust your thinking and perception on the fly and adapt to who you're talking to. It's a bit of a chameleon effect, and it's not disingenuous. If anything, it is the embodiment of curiosity. And I think that we are in an age when curiosity is undervalued. I think that we are kind of in a mode right now where many people are waiting to talk. And when other people are talking, they're not listening. They're simply waiting for their turn to talk. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to say, in this situation, what track should I take to best engage the person that I'm with? It's listening to them intently and understanding cues. So, and the reason I say this is when you are with somebody with tremendous cognitive flexibility, you come away from the conversation feeling enlivened. You've come away from it feeling like that was just the best engagement. This person is so smart. This person is so witty. This person is so personable. And it's not that they're the smartest person in the room. It's not that they're the most charismatic. It's that they pulled you into the conversation rather than had you sit and wait for them to say what they're going to say. So it's the art of listening for cues to ask insightful questions. Oh, you did that back in the day. Oh, you know what? I was in that too. Tell me more about that. Tell me a little more about that. How did that feel? How did that work? Curiosity breeds engagement, especially when it's focused on an individual and you're able to kind of bring out in them their story that they want to tell, that they want to share. Everybody loves to feel valued. Everybody loves to feel seen. We hear that a lot. I felt seen. Being seen and being heard is simply somebody else setting aside their story for a second to say, we're talking about your story and I'd love to hear it. So cognitive flexibility is such a foundational thing, and there's a way to work on that. You can go into engagement. So let's say that you're at your staff meeting and there's a fellow peer that's either in another working group or maybe in another department that you really don't know. Take an opportunity to go over to them and say, hey, I saw that you were commenting on a deployment for AI on this. I'd really love to get your thoughts on that. I want to go a little deeper on that. And we're going to talk about ways you can kind of leverage that moving forward. But it's as simple as asking questions and really wanting an answer and showing that you really want an answer. That then evolves into a promotion focus. And here, what I don't mean is that you want to promote in the job. That can apply there. I think that there's kind of an underlying, strategy here of being ready for promotion in the literal sense. But what this means is that you're actively striving for positive outcomes. So taking that conversation about, if you're talking to another department head or another department person about an AI deployment, especially in IT, we can be very cautious folk and we can be very pessimistic. Well, AI is really not mature enough and our data set's not mature enough and we don't have governance right now. And we start from a no. There's a really, really prevalent tendency for IT people, especially veteran IT people, to start from no and then try and argue your way into a yes at some point. But a promotion focus is saying it's listening. It's that adaptive listening and engagement and figuring out what their positive outcome is and starting to talk about that, starting to shift the conversation, always moving the conversation towards what could we achieve? What could be done here? How could this turn out amazing? Because if you're not including that in the conversation, Number one, you're automatically setting up an adversarial relationship if they're coming in with a positive outcome and you're coming in with a negative outcome. They now view you as an adversary. So the idea of building a social relationship off of that, it happens, but it usually doesn't happen until you overlap and both of you figure out what a win looks like from this engagement. Coming into it with how can I acknowledge and show them that I want the same positive outcome, and then go into let's talk about what needs to happen to get to that positive outcome. And it doesn't have to be project based. This can be any number of things. This can be for the relationship in general. This can be just kind of, hey, tell me about your spouse and your kids. Tell me about your education. Tell me about your job. That little bits of curiosity focused in a positive thing. So, oh, hey, you went to school there. That's amazing. I heard they have a great program. Boy, that's going to really prepare you for opportunities in the future. It's looking at the future as a great place to be and including that in the conversation, shaping your conversation around this promotion focus. That then evolves into what is called perceived prowess. So, we talked about the idea of if you come in negative, that it's setting up an adversarial relationship. At some point, you do want to be able to advocate for your competency, the stage one in the rocket, that investment that you made. You want them to acknowledge what you bring to the table. That is perceived prowess. So, perceived prowess is where you have the ability to start inserting how your expertise can benefit their ambitions. And now you are viewed as a resource. You are now viewed as a go-to person once again. So it's the perception that that you are not there to diminish their ambitions. You are not there to act as a barrier to accomplishing their goals. You are there to act as an ally that is looking out for them, but ultimately wants them to achieve their goals, that you want to see the same success they want to see. When you scale that, you get what's called networking efficacy. If you take that and replicate it across multiple people, if you now have dozens or hundreds, thousands of people that see you that way, every one of those people is a potential opportunity for your future. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But these are all micro investments that you're making, getting people to see you as a valued relationship in their network, that they want to stay in touch, that they, hey, let me link up with you on LinkedIn. Let me get your phone number. Let me get your email address. And then later on, actually getting a ping. That's the acknowledgement of perceived prowess, is getting a text message or a message on LinkedIn or an email that says, hey, I ran across this and I would love to get your take. Are you available for a call, or can you give me a quick bit of advice? That is the ultimate acknowledgement that you are doing it right, is when people actually are starting to acknowledge the expertise that you've promoted out there, that you've said you have, and start relying on it because you're presenting it in a way that they feel they can engage with. So this all goes to a very future focused, and we talked about promotion. We talked about promotion focus. Promotion focus and future focus coexist, but they are different. So promotion focus by nature exists in the future because you're not going to get any wins out of the past. You can reinterpret, I guess, and you can kind of look at the past with much more gentle eyes than perhaps you have. But our wins are always in the future. So a future focused means that you are always looking at what is to come as much as possible. You may refer to the past, especially when you're building your competency, when you're explaining your abilities, you're explaining what the investments you've made to be as competent as you are in your profession. But you want to keep your conversations and you want to keep your networking stance future focused. What could we build together? What could happen? So it's that positivity of promotion focus, along with the future orientation of let's not dwell on the past. And we've had those conversations. We've all fallen in with a coworker, with somebody we meet at an event, or somebody that we, are related to, or something like that, where they live in the past. And the past generally is a negative place. People live in the past because they can't seem to reconcile events that they wish they had done different or wished had turned out different. So you see it manifest in different kind of perseverations on the past. I have friends that I worked with for 40 years, and we talk about the past quite a bit. But I can tell when we're perseverating on it, when now we're talking about the past at the cost of the future. Well, this happened, and so because of that, we're never going to get here. Future focused and promotion focused means that you are oriented on a future and you want that future to be great. You want that future to be positive. So if you're constantly remunerating about the past and looking at that as a barrier to the future, people won't want to network with you. You will have a small group of loyal friends who are also commiserating about the past. But good luck building a career off of that. Good luck building more relationships and building a broader network off of shared misery. So it just doesn't attract people. And the people it does attract don't want to move forward. This is a gravity well that really exists. I mean, this is an uncomfortable truth that we have to acknowledge is that not everybody, this is all adapted discipline. Not everybody wants to take this on. There are people out there that want the comfort of being told that the position they're in is not their fault and that they are totally justified feeling resentful about the fact that they never achieved their ambitions. And that comfort is an indulgence, that there's a level of discomfort and forward momentum, and that is the adoption of risk. That you have to understand that this might not work, but what if it does? And if it doesn't work, okay, then we'll deal with that. We'll have mitigation strategies. We'll approach with caution. But you want to stay future focused in a temporal orientation, meaning that it really does mean you're looking at the future as a place you are going to occupy, and you want it to be amazing when you get there. So all of this kind of now gets into persistence. So persistence is moving forward despite setbacks. So it is not being pushy. So we tend to think of persistence in networking as kind of sales. And here's a brutal truth. Everything comes back to sales. That if you think you got into public service or public sector and you're avoiding sales, I'm sorry, but you didn't. Because sales is getting people to want to consume what you're providing. If you're in the private sector, it's at a profit. If you're in the public sector, it's not. But ultimately, we want our constituents to willingly and eagerly consume the services that we are providing. We want them to play in our parks. We want them to drive on our roads. We want them to use our utilities. We want them to live in our cities, work in our cities, play in our cities, our counties, our states. So we are selling. So persistence is the idea that if there is a setback, you don't abandon your ambition. That if you make 10 attempts at an event to make connections and five of them fall flat, five of them you run across somebody that's not interested in meeting you, that gives you the up and down, kind of looks at you like, who are you? Why am I talking to you? Just shows disinterest. That's okay. Yeah, it stings a little bit, especially if it's somebody you really wanted to get to know. Maybe it's somebody that's interesting or somebody has a role that you aspire to, but you have to be okay with that rejection because it's quick and it's not forever. This is not a condemnation of you. This is just, hey, that person wasn't interested. But if out of 10 you get five that actually do want to engage and you only get one that leads to a really sticky relationship from that point, somebody that you stay engaged with, that's a win. That's a huge win. If you look at sports, there's only one team out of every league that goes to a championship. Most teams settle their year by statistics below the 500 mark, meaning they lose more than they win. You have to be comfortable with those odds. You have to be comfortable with the idea that to get a win, I may have to go through some losses, but you have to be persistent. Don't give up. Don't let one negative encounter, don't let one negative person, don't let one negative condition stop you from continuing to build your network. Because as we said before, that network is something that you are going to operationalize at some point in the future. And you want to make sure that you never stop investing in it. That is the key. There's no finish line. This is not check the box and you're done here. This is continual investment in yourself and in others. And I can say from my experience, there is a glorious tipping point out there where you are now not the person asking for relationships. There are people asking for relationships with you. And you have the opportunity to pay it forward, to reinvest in the next generation, in the next group of people who are trying to get their ambitions. And it is such an incredible honor to be in a position where people are looking to you for advice, for counsel, and for support. So don't underestimate the value of just being persistent while it's difficult, because it won't always be. And at the end of this, you're creating opportunity. Sometimes you have to be where the luck is. So I can tell you right now a brutal little truth that if you've ever talked to me kind of in a bar conversation or we've talked in a social setting, I've probably brought this up at some point. But the brutal truth is that for most executive positions, people aren't in those roles because they were the most uniquely competent person to handle it. They were in a place where they were seen and acknowledged. And when opportunity hit, they were present for opportunity to work. So you can't win the lotto if you don't buy a ticket. Okay. You can't win a game unless you join the sport. So it's putting yourself in positions where you can take advantage of fortunate timing, because that timing is kind of everything. There's a quote out there, and if you've been in my classes or you've seen me on other things, there's a quote from William Shakespeare from Julius Caesar that there's a tide in the affairs of men taken at the flood leads on to fortune omitted. All our lives are shallow in misery. On such a sea are we afloat now, and must take our ventures where they serve. And the idea is that we don't control our destiny. We control our placement for our destiny. This is what I talked about with the astronaut thing. I never became an astronaut, but I am wildly successful and I'm extraordinarily grateful and happy with the outcomes that I got because I just stayed persistent and put myself in places where I could take advantage of my experience, of my competency, of trust people put in me, but ultimately it's being in the right place at the right time where all those things serve you. That is the tide in the affairs of men. Be where the luck is. And having a network is the single most important thing. Most executive positions are not hired off of a resume. They are not hired off of an interview. They are hired off of people in a back room having a conversation saying, do you know this person? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know him. Or, hey, have you heard of this person? Second and third degree, the Kevin Bacon effect, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where they talk about everybody in acting has acted with Kevin Bacon to some degree with 6 degrees of separation. That exists in the professional world. That if people will speak your name in a positive way behind your back, you are much more likely to get the opportunities you're putting in for than if people have to figure out who you are and what you're about. Because promoting into an executive position is an incredible risk for the organization. They are forsaking all other opportunities and putting their trust in you to run an entire section of an organization. So an executive, the buck stops at your desk. And so you need to be in a position where they trust you with all of this responsibility and they can actually focus on other things. The best way to get that trust is not through the interview process. It's a part of it. It's part of kind of the civil service selection process. But the truth of it is, if somebody knows you or if somebody can be a reference for you that they trust or they know you personally and they trust you, it gives you such an amazing opportunity to get that position. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's a slam dunk. You still have to bring it for the interview and for the resume. But that little bit of extra acknowledgement from having a robust network can seal the deal on it. So all of this goes into the idea that you can now show authenticity in its best form. So we talk about authenticity, and I included this slide because everything I've led up to on this could come across as kind of building a veneer that you've got this outside personality that you're building that's not authentic to who you really are. And I'm really arguing the opposite, that I'm saying build a core competency that you feel comfortable with, get other people to acknowledge that. You should feel complete alignment between your values, your competency, what you bring to the table, and what other people see in you and trust you with. when you have a misalignment, when you're putting in for a level of responsibility or a level of authority that you really aren't qualified for and you don't feel you are, that's how imposter syndrome takes effect. And the truth is anytime you take risk-oriented advancement, anytime you move into a really big advancement from where you were, whether it's a larger organization or a more expanded role, you're going to feel a little imposter syndrome. Just that's good old fashioned kind of, insecurity about, hey, it's a realistic, I haven't done this before. I need to show that I can do it. But if you've built a resume and you've built a network and you've got other people that acknowledge your expertise, if you've got other people that can tell you got this, that, it helps you quickly overcome that imposter syndrome, especially if you're going to take advantage of moving into a new organization in an executive role. That is probably the biggest dice roll any of us will ever do, is when we come in as a stranger at an executive level over a group of 5 people, a group of 50 people, a group of 500 people, and we have to prove to them that we were the best choice for the job. Because none of them are going to give us that validation. Some of them will give us the benefit of the doubt. Most of them are going to be nice, but nice extends to a smile and a handshake. But their level of trust has to be earned. Whereas if you have a robust network of people that know you and believe in you and understand your strengths and weaknesses and can be very candid with you, that is where you find your strength to move forward in this new position and start building that relationship with the people that you've been entrusted with. Because an executive role is not a position of authority, it's a position of responsibility. So if you have to fall back on your authority to do your job, congratulations, you just failed at it. Because you need to show that you accept the responsibility for all of the people, for all of the mission, for everything that your part of the organization is supposed to be achieving, and that you are there as a protector and a provider and a supporter for other people to do the work. So if you have to fall back on your authority, that should be seen as a fail-safe. That should be seen as a break glass in case of emergency. That is not a daily way to do it. So to get to that point, one of the things that, and this is something that I preach widely. If you've seen me speak anywhere, you have heard me say, stop eating lunch alone. This is going to be the most practical advice that I'm going to give in this presentation today, and it's what I'm going to close with, is that big relationships start with small acts. And you may be asking yourself, how can I possibly get time to start building a network? I work 10 hours a day. I've got my family. I've got my other obligations. Where on earth do I have time to start investing in social capital? And that is lunch. So for the most part, most of us should have an hour a day for lunch that is set aside for us to do whatever we need to do. If you spend that sitting at your desk, eating alone and looking at spreadsheets or looking at dashboards or looking at the control panel for your, software application or SaaS platform, you are wasting that time because you get to do that the rest of your day. That is what's called work. Your lunch should be your period to invest in relationships. And that can take place in multiple forms. It can take place in having lunch with your peers or the people you're closest to in the organization so you can share information, but also start developing that trust, that kind of familiar cadence where you feel comfortable being more and more candid with them. It's a chance to have, interactions with people that work for you and that you work for. I used my lunch hours I would take teams out when I was an executive and say, hey, tell me about what you're doing. This is your opportunity. We're just breaking bread together. This is your opportunity to tell me everything that you're up to now. This is your opportunity to kind of fill me in on everything you got. And the excitement in their eyes. I think that IT people, most of us were Labrador retrievers in a former life, because for real dedicated technologists, there's nothing we love better than bringing a success to somebody's doorstep and, kind of getting a duck and putting a duck at somebody's feet. So to be able to say, hey, we overcame this problem, we were able to do this deployment, we're able to move the project forward, or we were able to complete it. There's so much unsung work that goes on in technology. Giving them a chance to sing a little bit means the world. So use those opportunities, and vice versa. When you take that opportunity to have lunch and talk with somebody that you work for, if you're a department head, maybe it's with your assistant city manager or county executive, maybe it's with a fellow department head. Maybe it's with a peer from another organization. It's limitless. The opportunities for lunch are limitless. Don't waste it. This is where you can actualize your network, and this is where the maintenance and support goes on. So stay connected. Use your time wisely to stay connected. So that is my presentation on this. And my conclusion is just continually invest in yourself. You keep growing or start dying. So at Public Technology Institute, that's what we're about. So we are here, we are a nonprofit that exists to invest in the careers and well-being of technology professionals in public service. So we have learning events and conferences. We have our peer groups like MESAC and RITA that you can go to their conferences and we team up with them to provide content. We also have our own conference. We'll talk about that in a sec. But we have certifications in informal learning. We have our CGCIO program. That's our flagship for Certified Government Chief Information Officer. But you also have programs for formal education. Don't stop going. I'm in my 50s and I'm going back to school. I'm going to get my doctorate. And yes, there are days when I regret that. But most days I understand the value of the investment and it gives me that future orientation of accomplishment. It keeps me in the game. It keeps me feeling young and it keeps me feeling engaged. So make sure that you're continually investing in yourself in some way. So a brief word about the Public Technology Institute. We have three pillars that we provide services on. We have IT consulting, which our consulting services include IT assessment strategy, operational performance review, and leadership alignment. So it's broad level advisory. We don't do a lot of hands-on keyboard, but if you find yourself where you just need another voice or you need somebody to help coach you through something, we are definitely a resource in that space. And then we have our Public Technology Institute conference. So this is the Govett Leadership Symposium and Summit. This is going to be in November 8th through 10th, 2026 at the Hilton Doubletree in Bloomington, Minnesota. So I invite you all to attend that. It's an opportunity to build your network. I can tell you right now, the secret sauce for PTI is that we are one of the few conduits where you can meet technology professionals in public service from across the country at all different levels. The last conference, I was having dinner with the CIO for one of the states, but also having drinks and talking with somebody who's an IT manager from a very small special district that handles water. So it's just this wide variety, and it's just such an amazing platform and opportunity to start growing your network. So our other service that we have is our membership services, and that's one way that you can definitely manage your network and stay connected with everybody. So pti.org is our website. You can find all of our services and all of our opportunities there. So on behalf of the Public Technology Institute, I want to thank you all for tuning into this. We will have a follow-up conversation on this on March 3rd, 2026 at 1 p.m. Central Time. So that comes out to 11 a.m. West Coast and 2 p.m. East Coast. And that's just it's a Zoom meeting where it's an opportunity to talk through some of these things. If there's things in here that caught your interest, if there's stuff in here that you would like to get deeper conversation around, that's an opportunity. We get online for an hour and it's really run by the audience. So it's your opportunity to ask us for your curiosity and an opportunity to kind of get to know the team. So thank you all, and I appreciate you tuning in.
Thank you for watching episode 1 of the Professional Development Series presented by PTI. The next episode in the series will premiere on March 24th at 9 a.m. For more information about other PTI offerings such as certifications, membership, and consulting, visit pti.org.